All right, welcome back. So we are now going to be looking at our game over logic and our restart logic here. So our game over logic, we just have to now think as designers here. What do we want to happen in our game when the game is over? So what I want to happen here, what I like to do is whenever my player gets hit with an asteroid, I am immediately going to display my game over message. And then what I'm actually going to do is after that wave, that current wave that is in play here. So if I get hit with the first asteroid, there'll be another 9 asteroids that come behind it there. What I want to happen is I want the game over to appear immediately, but I want the restart instructions to appear after the entire wave has been destroyed from the boundary out here. The reason I do this is to try and, kind of taunt the player and say, hey, you just died. Now you're going to have to sit through these asteroids a little bit to kind of showcase them and motivate them and say, hey, you know what? You have to defeat all of this to keep going. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a little bit more logic to this to try and enable that game over text when my player gets hit. And then we're also going to enable that restart text after a period of time. And so how we're going to do this here is back in our game controller class. Our game controller class, in order to help facilitate this, we're going to add a couple different variables at the top of our class here. These are going to be private variables, and they'll both be booleans. Okay, we're going to have a boolean for game over, and we're also going to have a private boolean for restart. Okay, now initially both of these will be false, so I'm going to add false to both of these. Okay, so these are both initially false, and we'll just set them to true whenever they are necessary. And so here, what happens now when we have a game over? Well, we need to trigger it first. So let's start at the beginning here. My game over happens when my player hits an asteroid. And so in my destroy by contact script here, we need to initiate game over. We can do this now because we have access to our game controller script and we have access to a game over function that is public. And so we're just going to tell the game controller at this point, hey, player got hit. Let's start the game over process right now, at which point the game controller is going to take that direction and say, okay, what do we have to do now? What do we have to do now to get this to work? The first thing we're going to do here is we're going to say my game over is equal to true. Okay, my game over is now true. I am in the game over process. But on top of that, I'm going to grab my game over text object. Okay, I'm actually going to name this. I'm going to rename my variables here to be very explicit. So I'm going to call this my game over text object like that and object like that, just to be very, very explicit with what they actually are. And down here, I am going to have to work with my game over text object. Now, before I show you what we have to do here, remember, our game over text is just disabled. Okay, remember, we have this little red game over text in the middle of our screen, and we disabled this entire game object in order to not display it right away. And so in our code here, what we want to do is we're going to call the set active function. The set active function takes in a Boolean value to tell that object whether or not it is awake or activated or not. And we're going to say here true. Okay. Now, if I just play this game now, we should see, let me just clear this off. We should see here, if my player gets hit with an asteroid. Okay, so you can see here I do get an error. So there's clearly something going on here. So it says unassigned reference variable. The variable game over text object has not been assigned. So what happened here was that in my game controller, because I changed the name of those objects, it took away those 2 game over text and restart text objects that I have here. So let's just re-enable these again here by just grabbing them and pasting them right in there. Okay. And so now let's test this out one more time. And there you go, game over appears. Now the problem with this now is that if I don't do anything, okay, my game is going to keep going. You can see here I've got more waves and waves and waves. What I want to do is I want to display that restart text after the wave finishes and prevent any further waves from occurring. Okay, and so I want to basically end the current wave, print off that text to tell the player how do you restart the game, and then stop any additional waves from being created. Okay, so in order to do that, once again, we are going to have to go back to our game controller here. And so what we need to do is we need to modify here our spawn waves coroutine. Okay, if we look at this, you can see here, this is where we are waiting for the next wave to happen. What we can do here is we can, afterwards, we can check to see if the game is over, okay? And we're going to do this by just checking that Boolean value that we have, game over, okay? Is my game over? If it is over, what are we going to do? Well, what we're going to do here is we're going to say restart text object, dot set active true, okay? And then we are also, just before that, I forgot to mention, restart is equal to true. That is our Boolean value, okay? But here is where, here's my quick little one question quiz, okay? I'm stuck in this while loop, okay? This while loop is going on forever and ever and ever. How do I break out of this? Okay, how do I break out of this while loop? Well, we would use a break. Okay, this break, if you hover over it, you can see highlights. This break is used to exit out of the current existing loop. This will not break out of just the if statement. The if statement is not a loop here. What it's breaking out of instead is it's breaking out of the whatever loop it is currently in. So if I'm in multiple loops, it's going to break out of the immediate loop that's here. Okay. So what we need to do here is we're going to say the restart is true. We're going to set that text object to be set, and we're going to break out of this, which means we're not going to spawn any more waves anymore. So let's see how this looks. Okay, so here it comes. Now we're going to wait until the entire wave gets destroyed. And then there is our press R, restart by pressing R. Now, obviously, now we need to implement the pressing of the R button to this, but we are 2/3 of the way all the way there. And so how do we now implement our restart functionality here? How do we implement that restart? Well, we're going to do all of that actually in our update loop here, okay? Our update loop here is where we're going to check to see, check if we need to restart, okay? Now, you could replace just a key press with an actual button. That would probably be a little bit better, but here, by showing you guys how to press a single key, you can I'll actually be demonstrating how you can look for specific keys rather than using the input manager as well. So a couple different ways here. So the first thing we need to do here is check if we're going to restart. And remember, technically speaking, if you're ever using an if statement, the easiest thing for it to check is a Boolean value because it's either a 0 or 1. Anything other than that, it gets a little bit more complex. So this is in fact quite, it's not the best, but it's fast because it's very simple in terms of performance here. And so what we want to do here is we're checking if we need to restart. And if we need to restart, we need to now start listening for a particular key. And so I'm going to show you guys how to listen to a particular key here. And I'm going to use an if statement. I'm going to check if my input, and I'll use the function here, get key down, okay? This get key down, it says here, returns true during the frame the user starts pressing the key identified by the key code enum parameter, okay? This is basically saying that it's going to check whether or not it's pressing a specific key that I determine or I am checking for. And this is done by using a key code enum, okay? Key code enums are, they're called enumerations. Think of them as kind of like lists, but they also have numbers associated with them. If I use the word keyword here, key code dot, you can see here, I can see a whole list of keys that I can listen to, including joystick buttons. And joystick buttons would refer to things like controllers, Xbox controllers, and whatnot as well. We need to listen for the R key, and so we're going to search for R, and we're going to select it, okay? If all of this is true, I can now restart our game, okay? And the way we restart our game is we need to utilize the scene manager, okay? There is a new, I guess there are many ways of doing this, okay? I'm going to show you the 3 ways of doing this. There is the old way, don't use this, okay? This used to look like this. It used to look like application.load level, okay? Now, if you hover over there, you'll see this in square brackets. It says deprecated. This is now obsolete and needs to use scene manager.load scene, which we do use. The reason I'm showing you this is you'll often see documentation that still has this on it, and so just be aware that that's what's actually happening here, okay? The second way here, the new way, oops, let's say here, the new way, use this, is by using the scene manager. Now, the scene manager right out of the box does not work. This is because we need to include a using statement up at the top here in order to access that particular library. And so we're going to say here using Unity Engine.scene management. Okay? That will give us access to the scene manager object right here and the function load scene. okay? And so what we want to load in here is a scene based on either a build index or a scene name, which is a string, okay? And so if we look very carefully at Unity, we can see that my scene name is level 1, right? Level dash 1. And so I want to include here level dash 1, okay? Or level space 1, I should say. That will reload the existing scene here, okay? So let's test it, shall we? Let's have a look. We click play. Music's playing. Okay. I shoot a bunch of these and then I get hit. Wait for this to go. This now appears. Hit the R key. And my game restarts once again. Score gets reset. We are races. Okay. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much everything that we were looking to do here. Now, if I wanted to prefab everything, I would likely prefab my canvas. I would prefab my boundary object. I would prefab my background. In fact, I'd probably do this actually a little bit differently. So what I would do is I'd probably nest a number of these things here. So I'd probably create a simple little empty game object here called level objects. Okay, and I would add the various level objects I have here. So for instance, my boundary would be a level object. My background would be a level object. Oops, level object. My main camera would be a level object. My spaceship would be a level object. My canvas is not part of the level, but it's on top of the level, so I'm going to keep it out there. My game controller is separate. It's not really part of the game level as well. And so what I would do is I would actually take this and I would take this entire level object and I would store it as a prefab like that, okay? Which means that if I deleted my level object like this, I could delete my entire game and just bring the prefab right back in and everything would be fine, okay? Neat. Everything seems to be working as we expect, okay? So that is it for this level. We have one more week where we're going to do a little bit more playtesting, but other than that, that's everything. So I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.